everyone! Hello, hello. Let me see, is the microphone working? Seems like there might be some small white noise, but we'll just have to deal with it for now. Hello everyone, welcome to today's stream. I hope you all are doing well today. I managed to wake up at a decent hour today, which made me pretty happy. So I don't know if any of you saw in the schedule announcement, but I am going to be going on a short little hiatus from live streaming for at least a week, I'd say, while I settle into some new things happening in my life. And I might be able to resume live streaming like with sometime after that, but I'm still planning to upload videos, just might not live stream as much as I do now. So yeah, and then I guess on to today's subject. We are reading more of infaminxy's biographies, and we're hoping to finish them today because there's only like, I don't know, 6 or 5, and I feel like we were able to get some stuff done. I can't talk. We were able to get a good amount done last time, so depending on how long all these ones are, we'll see how if we can finish them or not. So, and also forgive me if there's any stream lag or anything. There seem to be some issues happening behind the scenes, but I'm having a hard time getting everything to cooperate. Okay. So, without further ado, let's begin. Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, or mispronounce anything, and for any noises in the background. Let me just get this all set up. Here we go. Let me shrink myself down into each corner. That'll be good. Okay. Pradia the Protector is the biography we'll be first reading today. And here is her tapestry. Da, 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 da. Let's see, what is her poem? When night falls upon Muni and the monsters come out, the brave queen comes to fight them all out. And now for the biography. Pradia Butterfly, the Protector, born 794, died 836, was queen 812 through 836, married to Armand Cross, children Umbria Butterfly. Pradia was born to Queen Nebula Butterfly and Alaric Flowers in the year of 794. She had her father's light blue colors as well as blooming flowers on her cheeks. Pradia was a very quiet kid, although silence isn't to be confused with being shy. She was just not talkative. She only talked in reply to questions and only spoke to family or close friends. This was only a small phase, however, and she would quickly grow out of it. Her childhood wasn't the happiest either. She would witness almost constant fights with her parents, which would make her extremely sad and build her slight cold personality. Due to Nebula being overprotective of Pradia, she was overbearingly sheltered for much of her childhood. She was only allowed outside if 2 guards were in attendance with her, and she was forbidden from leaving the castle walls. Pradia absolutely hated this and saw her mother as an annoying and controlling, so she planned to sneak out one night as an act of rebellion. A few nights later, Pradia snuck outside the castle after dinner. She swiftly made her way through the garden and into the village, where she witnessed the extreme poverty of the kingdom and how miserable everything was. But her moment of sentiment was disrupted when an explosion happened in the middle of the village and a monster attack began. Pradia was able to hide in a pile of wood and rocks and watch the whole thing play out. She was rescued by a guard and brought back to the castle where her mother awaited her. Nebula's panic attack ended once Pradia was brought into her arms. Regardless of her mother being glad she was safe, Pradia was still punished for being grounded for 2 weeks. However, the experience would spark a passion in Pradia, and she wanted to fight the monsters to defend her people after seeing humans being brutally attacked. She would begin training in a class without other young with other young aspiring soldiers under the wing of Dom Astonia Fields. Astonia was a very strict and had high standards, but when seeing Prostadia's agility and fighting spirit, she was quite impressed and decided to train the young princess one-on-one. Astonia was extremely hard on Prostadia, but it would pay off to make Prostadia a strong warrior. As for Prostadia's fighting abilities, she was very quick and light on her feet, as well as bold and tough sometimes, even fighting with her own fists. However, she was not very strategic. Though the older and more experienced she got more, and she would improve on this. Finally, after waiting for years, Prostadia claimed the wand on her 14th birthday in 808. She was quick to start studying the spells of Meteora, Mars, and Etheria, and very soon started implementing them into her fighting. Prostadia's first fighting experience was on Corn 5th during a ball, celebrating Princess Varley Watermelon's 16th birthday with a group of monster bandits intruded the room. Prostadia immediately went into fighting mode and transformed her wand into a hammer. She then proceeded to fight the monsters while the whole room watched in fear. She ended up bashing each of the monsters to death, and although she saved everyone, Nebula was extremely upset. Pandora and Nebula would fight over Prostadia's involvement in battles from that point on. Prostadia would argue, saying, "If you're not going to protect your own people, then I will," and Nebula would yell at her, saying it was far too dangerous. The constant fights would further strain their relationship. In the winter of 808, monster attacks became much more prevalent due to the farmers burning monsterland to expand their farmland. Human villages were being attacked weekly, and Prostadia was eager to do something. Her teacher Dom Estonia encouraged her to go against her mother's wishes and fight alongside the soldiers, and that's exactly what Prostadia did. Due to Prostadia's magic and reinforcement, the human armies were soon able to drive the monsters out of the village, and there weren't any more attacks for the next few months. Prostadia would also go on scouting missions to search for any signs of possible monster attacks. During these missions, if she came across an innocent monster, she would attack it. As for how Nebula reacted to the situation, she felt helpless and simply decided to just let it go. Instead of arguing with her daughter, she decided to simply not speak to her at all. While Prostadia was happy she had finally had freedom, she was devastated at her mother barely talking to her anymore sometimes, even crying over the matter. In the Silverbell Ball of that year, Prostadia met Thorin Johansson. The two hit it off immediately with their love of battle and combat, and started a relationship. In 809, Prostadia's sister was kidnapped and held at a bounty. Pandora and Prostadia weren't necessarily close, though they did have a caring relationship, so Prostadia was very passionate to save her. At the council meetings discussing a plan to raid the camp and save the princess, Prostadia proposed a plan which explained how they could double across the monsters, and the rest of the commanders were impressed. Prostadia arrived at the camp at dusk the next day. She walked through the camp with her group of knights as well as Hekapu on her sides, while retaining a fierce, immediate, intimidating face. She approached the general with an eager stare and demanded the bounty. Prostadia denied giving the bounty until she knew her sister was safe. The general pointed to one of the tents on the hill and assured Prostadia that her sister was in that tent. Prostadia nodded her head in satisfaction, turned and headed to the back of the ground of knights, and Hekapu walked up to give the bounty to the general. Little did the general know Hekapu had cloned herself, and the clone was the one giving the bounty, or fake coins, to the general, while Prostadia and Hekapu, using an invisibility spell traveled up to the tent to find Pandora. Once Pandora was safely obtained, Prostadia and Hekapu blasted out of the tent and began running out the camp. The general then realized the money was fake, and him along with the rest of the monsters began to chase after them. The general was able to snatch Pandora away from Prostadia. Prostadia transformed her wand into a dagger and stabbed the general. He quickly gave Pandora to another of his soldiers and commanded him to run as far as he could. Enraged, Prostadia stabbed the general again, this time in the chest, and ran after her sister. She ran as fast as she could for hours until the sun began to set, but it was no hope. Pandora had been long gone. Enraged, Prostadia stabbed the general again. Oh wait, that's the same thing. When Prostadia returned she felt immense shame and sadness, and her mother also shared these emotions. Prostadia fell into her mother's arms crying when entering the castle. They grieved over the loss of Pandora together. It was the first moment the two of them shared in years. In 812, Prostadia would assume the throne due to her mother abdicating. It was also at this time that she broke up with Thorin due to the emotional pressure of everything going on in her life. Within the first few months of Prostadia's reign, the problem of monsters stealing corn from fields became more and more prominent. Prostadia stationed a few guards to keep the monsters away, but this proved useless as they developed strategies to sneak past the guards. The food shortage was bad enough for the people, but due to the new problem it became even worse. Prostadia then decided to try another solution. She created a magic barrier around the corn. It solved the problem as monsters couldn't find a way to get around it. The barrier is still used today to stop corn thieves. Like the previous queens of the Dark Age before her, Prostadia had to deal with the famine and poor economy left by the Celestia's long winter. While not much progress was made, Prostadia was able to start up a trade in Potter Kingdom and Watermelon Kingdoms, which did somewhat help. Due to the kingdom's weakened state, it was more prominent to monster attacks. Prostadia herself decided to go out into the village to scout and protect the kingdom from the monsters along with the knights. Despite her fierce and intimidating attitude, the act earned her love from people, and they gave her the alias the Protector. During a morning in 816, Prostadia was informed of a monster attack in the village. She and a battalion of knights came to the scene and fought the monsters. Before Prostadia killed them with her wand in dagger form. While helping out the citizens, Prostadia met one of the medics, Armand Cross, cousin of Lady Maurice Cross. Armand immediately felt attracted to Prostadia as he liked her brash, stubborn personality. He went on and introduced himself to her, and the two had a slight conversation before Prostadia returned to the castle, claiming she had more work to do. Prostadia thought nothing of the encounter, while Armand fell completely in love with Prostadia. He tried to meet with her again, but found all the opportunities he had she simply ignored or was busy with other queenly duties. Meanwhile, on Prostadia's end, she found this random greeting strange, but shrugged them off as him trying to make a friendship, one that she didn't want. After a council meeting one night, Prostadia, Lady Maurice Cross, Lord Grievous Redbird, and a koala ocean man went out for beer. During some pleasant conversations, Lady Maurice, on her drunken state, accidentally revealed her brother, Armand, had a huge crush on her. While everyone else laughed, Prostadia just sat in surprise as she was hit with a wave of realization. Prostadia began returning Armand's random greetings, which made his confidence skyrocket. The two began dating after Armand asked her out for beer, and the Prostadia started to fall in love with him as well. All of this would lead up to them getting married in 817. The next year, in 818, the kingdom welcomed the new princess after Prostadia gave birth to her daughter, Umbria. In 820, Queen Relecta Spiderbite was assassinated alongside her son and heir, Josie. Ramanad Spiderbite, Relucta's sister, and new queen warned Prostadia and the surrounding kingdoms of the group of monsters that had murdered her sister. Prostadia kept herself aware, but after a few months of no threat, Prostadia started to let her guard down. That was until Dragonet 21st, when Ocean Man Palace and the Butterfly Kingdom village was raided by a group of monsters, presumably the same ones that killed Relucta's Spiderbite. Prostadia rushed into the scene to bring her people to safety in the castle, though she could not get to all of them. Sadly, when escorting a group of citizens, she was attacked by a large lizard-like monster, forcing her to the ground. Prostadia knocked him off with a spell and continued to battle him. More monsters began to aid their fellow commander in fighting the queen, and Prostadia began losing to them. They attempted to surround and strike her before she conjured a magic dome protecting herself, similar to the ones used for the cornfields. She then dipped down and caused the force field to explode, making the monsters explode into bits. But before Prostadia could catch her breath, some of the limbs began to regenerate. This is when Pradia realized that she wasn't up against only normal monsters, but that she was fighting Septarians as well. She recognized them from the many records of Etheria, Mars, and even some old Mundependence records. She transformed into her butterfly form, giving her more powerful power, and trapped them in magic flowers using her Lavarus lotus trap, and launched them into the sky, concluding the battle. The battle was named the Battle of Blue Vines, since blue vines were left around the village as a result of Prostadia's spells. Council meetings were made in order to try to determine a solution to their newfound monster problem. At the time, nothing like Eclipse's spell existed, so they were left with very limited options. Lord Redbird recommended war, but Prostadia refused, claiming the kingdom was in no place for war. It was only if her people's safety was threatened any further that she would take such drastic measures. 822 rolled around and there was no monster attacks, though another horrendous would take place. Prostadia went to check on her mother, Nebula, being worried about her deteriorating health, but when entering her room, Prostadia was met with the sight of her mother's corpse body on the floor. During the autopsy, it was shown that the high amounts of Lada poison was found in her system, leading to the theory that she was poisoned by monsters as an attack. But Prostadia, knowing of her mother's health state, confirmed it was suicide. Despite not having a good relationship with her mother, the death still did have an impact on her mentally, making her very depressed. It didn't help either when, in 827, Prostadia's father, Lotus, died of tuberculosis. In 832, Prostadia handed down the wand to her daughter. She also heard about the rumors of Umbria's strange magic, but didn't think much about them. In 834, there was a horrific attack on Roxon Cabin with over 56 casualties, including Lord Roxon. But while investigating the scene, Prostadia came across a teenage girl with dark blue hair looking very similar to Umbria, hanging on the wall with the words, "We're coming, princess," around her written in blood. Prostadia took this as the highest of threat and knew they weren't kidding. She immediately infiltrated a group, including herself, to search for the monster camp in order to take care of their problem. While roaming the forest of probable itchiness, Prostadia recognized monster tracks beyond the trail. When going closer to further examine the steps, she noticed they were officially fresh. Just then, the group was attacked by monsters. During the battle, Prostadia was able to kill some of the monsters, though the Septarian ones were able to kill most of the group before Prostadia escaped in her butterfly form. The attack would be the beginning of the Prostadian War. Prostadia immediately gathered as many troops as she could to fight, but their numbers were slim, so Prostadia set out a draft where every man in the kingdom over 16 would be forced to fight in the war. This would lead to many of the people disliking and hating her, claiming she split up their families. Prostadia would also order Umbria's magic training to be enhanced so she could fight in the war. In Gravnock of 835, the Battle of Queen's Road happened. A huge shipment from the Faharman kingdom to the Butterfly kingdom was attacked on Queen's Road. Prostadia used this as a chance to ambush them and attack. Though midway through the battle, she was getting heavily beaten and was backed into a corner, using a magic bubble to protect herself. Just then, the monsters were scared off by a battalion of shadow troops racing towards them, and leading them was none other than Umbria. The winter was one of the hardest of the kingdom. Many families lost their fathers, brothers, and husbands, and many died from hunger due to the attack on the food shipment from the Faharman kingdom that was supposed to help with the famine. In 836, the Battle of Shadows took place. It was the biggest fight yet, and Prostadia was fighting monsters left and right. Her husband and Umbria were also battling among her. Prostadia managed to defeat most of the monsters around her by dipping down and using her poison petal knockout spell, but one monster still stood from her spell, the general, Seth. Prostadia battled him sword to sword before he was able to get the upper hand on her and stab her straight through her chest, leaving her to fall to the ground. What happened next will be addressed in Umbria's chapter, but it would leave many of the monsters either dead or the few who escaped brutally injured, and would conclude the Prostadian War. Queen Prostadia was buried the next week at the age of 42 and would be forever remembered by the people for her acts of protection, though some continue to dislike her because of her draft. Prostadia in the Battle of Shadows. And then the next queen is Umbria, Queen of Shadows. Let's see. Lonely and dark was this girl, using what she had as a little girl, make darkness her friends and treated it as fine as a pearl. Quickly drink some water, just a second. Umbra Butterfly, the Queen of Shadows. Born 818, died 857, was Queen 836 to 857, married to Astro Firefly. Children, Hakita Butterfly. Umbria Butterfly was born on a cold, dark night in 818. Pradia named her Umbria, meaning daughter of the shadows, due to her dark hair and the moon being covered by the dark clouds in the night she was born. Very similar to her mother, Umbria was very silent and mute as a kid, though it came off as rather creepy due to her strange nature. She would stare at seemingly nothing for minutes at a time, and sometimes you would walk into her room seeing her sitting with lights off in the corner of her room just staring at the wall. Many of the servants and maids themselves even claimed to be scared of the child. Umbria didn't seem to have many friends either. Most children were scared of her due to both her weird habits and appearance. The dark blue hair and red eyes made for a somewhat scary look to other children. The ones that weren't scared of her bullied her, calling her a witch or a vampire or so on. She was hurt by the comments sometimes, but for the most part just ignored them. What bothered her the most was the loneliness she experienced because of it. It was for this reason that she began talking to shadows in her room, even giving them names like Blackie and Chad. One morning, Pradia and Armand woke up late at night to the muffled voices coming from down the hall near Umbria's room. They assumed she was just talking to herself, so they went to tell her to just go to bed. But upon going to her door, they heard multiple voices. Pradia quickly opened the door to just see Umbria talking to shadows on the wall. Though slightly creeped out, Pradia and Armand just put Umbria back to bed. Pradia and Armand talked to each other about it that night. Armand shrugged it off as her just being a weird kid, but Pradia swore her mother's intuition told her otherwise. In 832 came Umbria's assumed the wand. She began experimenting with magic and creating a spell to bring her shadow friends to life, with them now being real and able to interact. Umbria began to spend more time in her room than ever talking to them. Umbria never did much with her own magic at the time other than shadow-related spells and studying the spells of her grannies. But in 834 the Protestacian War began, and her magic training was excelled. This was when she began showing her true magic talent and power. She crafted very terrifying and powerful spells such as Shadow Consumption, Ravenous Raven, Silhouette Army, and Sapphic Shadow Storm. Some began to argue whether or not some of her spells were dark magic after she showed them off in battle. Magic scholars still speculate to this day. I personally can't confirm anything, but opinions vary. Sometimes during battle, Umbria would summon her shadow friends to help fight and gave their army a surprisingly strong advantage. Pradia was somewhat paranoid of her shadow magic, but seeing how much it helped them in war, she didn't question it. After a council meeting in 834 with the ministers in which each heir was brought, all the kids went outside into the garden once the meeting was concluded. Acacia flowers had been bullying Umbria since childhood, and while in the gardens, Acacia began taunting Umbria, calling her a freak, among other such names. Something that day in Umbria snapped, and she used her wand to lift up Acacia into the air with the black vines bursted from the ground and latched onto her. As all the other noble kids stared absolutely terrified, while Umbria retained an emotionless face. When Acacia yelled at her again to put her down, the vines began to grow red as Acacia began screaming and crying in pain before passing out. Lord and Lady Flowers were furious and demanded Umbria apologize. However, Pradia yelled at her, claiming her daughter bullied Umbria for years and got what she deserved, causing Acacia to cry. Intimidated, Lord and Lady Flowers made Acacia apologize in fear of being excused for their positions. From their positions. In 836, the Battle of Shadows came upon Muni. During battle, Umbria began fighting a plethora of monsters, summoning spells back to back. She was tackled by one of the monsters who attempted to rid her of her wand before Umbria used her Ravenous Raven spell, which consumed the enemy. She got up to hear a strange silence. Everyone stopped what they were doing to look over at something before all the monsters started cheering. Umbria looked over at the sight and realized what had happened. Her eyes filled with rage and sadness, and began to glow red and cry black tears. She rose up into the sky as a shadow aura surrounded her, and the sky faded black, causing everything to be darker. Her cheeks glowed, and humongous shadow tentacles emerged from Umbria's aura. Cracks in the ground began appearing, leading to a black void and an army of shadow figures appearing behind Umbria. The tentacles began snatching monsters left and right, consuming them in shadows until they faded into ashes. Over 95% of the monster army was killed by the attack, and those who escaped were left amputated or with some strange sickness that would kill them days later. Umbria tried snatching Seth, the one whom killed her mother. She struck him in his right eye with a tentacle. However, he was able to escape after Umbria saw her father falling into a crack in the ground and got distracted. Umbria's attack was what gave the battle the name, the Battle of Shadows, and this brought an end to the war. Though just because the war concluded didn't mean the suffering did, especially for Umbria. The next week, Umbria's coronation was held. What shocked many was the emotion in Umbria that was rarely ever seen. You could see the anguish and sadness in her eyes as the crown was being laid on her head. People began to fear Umbria even more after hearing about her during the Battle of Shadows. It was from this reason that Armand worried about Umbria finding love, especially considering she never had a boyfriend in her life. He considered setting up an arranged marriage, but was skeptical knowing how it worked out for Prastadia's parents. He ended up going through it, however, and made an agreement with the Fireflies. Umbria and Astro Firefly's wedding was held the next month. Astro himself admitted he was never necessarily scared of Umbria, but simply weirded out by her behavior. One night, a maid walked in on Umbria talking to one of her shadow friends. She turned her head to the maid and gave her a blank stare, and the maid nervously apologized, but Umbria just kept staring. In the following weeks, the maid was nowhere to be found and completely disappeared. Gossip began to start up, and rumors were spread of Umbria murdering the maid. Though creepily enough, everyone who spoke too much on the subject disappeared as well, sparkling even more fear in the community. Many of the families of maids/servants and people who had disappeared banded together to start a search for their missing family members. Astro felt sympathy for these families and decided to join in on these searches. One day, Astro showed up to the search party meet-up point, saying in a serious tone that the search was called off and canceled all further searching. His reason? He claimed poisonous toxins had been found in the forest. Many believed this reason while others didn't. Some speculated Umbria threatened him, but nothing was confirmed. And I'll say it is from this point on, Astro began to act strange around Umbria. The cases of missing people diminished, and so did talk of Umbria. People connected the two and found other ways to gossip without talking, though like through notes that were later burned and when finished talking. This was known as the Umbrian silence, seeing as how many people avoided talking about Umbria. In 837, Umbria conceived her heir. Later that year, she gave birth to Hecatea, a girl with pink colors from her father and Hecatian moons on her cheeks. Probably pronouncing that wrong, sorry guys. Umbria was a strange mother. Although she wasn't abusive in any way, she wasn't necessarily caring either. Astro reports that whenever Hecatea started crying in Umbria's arms, she would just calmly stroke her hair, giving her a motionless stare while whispering, "Hush now." He admitted it eerily creeped him out. Umbria never really did anything to try to improve the famine or financial problems of the kingdom. In fact, she was somewhat neglective on her queenly duties and spent a majority of her time in the dark room speaking to her shadow friends. Umbria passed the wand to Hecate in 851. This was also the same year her father Armand passed at the age of 56 due to complications of multiple scoliosis. I can't pronounce it. Scoliosis. Rumors of Hecate's strange magic reached Umbria's ears in 852, though she wasn't bothered. The Magic High Commission pressured her to look into it, but Umbria claimed, "It's her wand now. It's her magic. It's her problem," Umbria said. During a night in 854, people reported waking up in the middle of the night to a man screaming. Some looked out their windows and went out into the streets to see what was happening and saw none other than King Astro running from a flaring shadow monster. He ran straight into the forest of certain death until he tripped over a branch and fell. His last sight was seeing a shadow monster looming over him before he was consumed by it and faded into ashes. Umbria made a statement the next day that one of her shadow friends went rogue and transformed into a monster after experimenting with her magic. It was seen that Umbria was somewhat distraught over the loss of Astro, so foul play was not discussed. In 857, Umbria sat bored on the throne one evening when two knights burst through the door with a monster in their arms. They had an amputated arm with a black skin and veins coursing off the amputated part. The knights claimed they found him roaming the forest and after interrogating found out he was part of Seth's army, though the monster said he no longer was after the Battle of the Shadows. Umbria saw this as an opportunity to attempt to find out where Seth was. She demanded he tell her the whereabouts of Seth immediately, to which he replied by spitting in her face and calling her a shadow scum. She calmly wiped off the spit from her face before turning furious and lifting him into the air. A sharp pain filled his body. Shadow veins grabbed onto him and glowed red before the pain became more immense and he yelled in pain. He told her he would tell her if she let him down. After a few seconds, Umbria decided to let him down. Umbria was met with seconds of silence before he charged towards her and grabbed her. He bashed his head into her, threw her over and over as blood and chips of her skull sprayed everywhere. Ugh. This was when Hecate walked into the scene. The monster chucked Umbria into the wall and jumped over to her and ripped into her back. The knights rushed over and stabbed him, making him fall unconscious, but by then the queen was long dead. And with that, Umbria tragically passed away at the age of 39. She was buried next to her grandmother Nebula, and Hecate's coronation was set to the next week. Umbria during the Battle of Black Shadows. Oh, that's pretty. She was certainly a strange queen. And surprisingly, next, we're skipping all those other queens, I guess, and we're going straight to Reena the Riddled, where this AU really deviates. Reena the Riddled. And here is the custom tapestry infaminxy made. Three queens since the Dark Age, if you subtract the boy. Add 4 more reigns to her domain, and what gets destroyed? Reena Butterfly, the Riddled. Born 1045, died 1089. Was queen 1066 to 1089. Married to John Rochley. Children, Selena Butterfly. Reena Butterfly was born to Queen Hesperia Butterfly in 1045. She was named Reena, derived from the Hybonian word Rhine, meaning song, after her mother's beautiful songs. She had ginger hair and green eyes, with brown infinity symbols on her cheeks. This was the first ever occurrence of a queen's cheek marks being repeated to another queen. Because of this, many speculated Reena was a reincarnation of Galaxia the Clairvoyant, especially later on due to their similar behavior. As a child, Reena was reserved and shy, preferring to read books in her room. Something she enjoyed the most as a kid was her mother singing lullabies and songs to her, with her personal favorite being The Fair and the Wild. Reena wouldn't be surrounded by her parents and books her whole childhood. seeing as how she would gain many younger siblings, with Ace being born in 1047, Valette in 1049, Space in 1060, and Fortuna and Dorina in 1061, and in 63 all respectively. In 1050, the 5-year-old Lady Gaiza was sent to live with the butterfly family while her parents went on an interdimensional zoologist trip. The reason being that their families knew of Reena's great-grandmother Vesper, knew Great Gaiza's great-grandfather, and trusted the butterflies to watch over their daughter. As a hello present, Lady Gaiza gifted Reena a turtle with from the dimension of cats with human faces, which Reena gladly accepted. The two immediately bonded and became best friends, always traveling to the library together and doing fun activities. In 1051, Hesperia took Reena to see one of her many trips to the Firefly Library. While picking out her usual books, she spotted a book of riddles. It took her interested and she grabbed it and added it to her collection. She would spend the entire evening reading over just that book. She found it just so captivating and interesting. She used all of her free time the next few days solving the riddles in the book, and when she finally did, she requested even more. She grew a passion for problem-solving, specifically mysteries, puzzles, and mainly riddles. Over time, her problem-solving abilities grew to become more strong, and her royal tutor reported to Queen Hesperia of her passion, and it wasn't long before Reena started creating her own riddles. King Robin reported every evening at dinner, Reena would riddle her family. In 1059, Reena inherited the wand. The crystal of the wand transformed to be a Rubican spinning cube, an extremely rare crystal cube with only 7 in the entire multiverse. Reena warned not to stare at the cube for too long or hypnosis would come upon you. Reena's magic was unique, and in order to do a spell with her wand, she would have to rearrange the cubes to conjure the spell. The process was named riddle magic. Reena at first had a lot of trouble with it, but after much practice and help from myself, she managed to get a hold of it. Although her magic was average to somewhat advanced, a reoccurring problem with her spells was how they worked quite too literally when their use was for a metamorphical purpose. This would prove to be a huge problem for her later on. Reena also had some unique things she did regarding her magic training, such as wrist, hand, arm exercises, and crystal ball shout. Exercises she performed before beginning to practice. She also created rather specific names for her spells. In 1061, Bodis Lucitor personally invited Reena to a mother's birthday ball as a way to get under her dress, and she said she'd think about it. Parties were never her thing. She found them loud and obnoxious, so her "I'll think about it" comment was her way of saying no. But after heavy encouragement from her mother, Hesperia, she decided to go. That night, Reena attended the ball with Gaiza. It was pretty typical and relaxed, nothing too exciting. Some of the Munister heirs were there, such as Rayan Watterson and Norige Malay, as well as the Jade family. Reena's poor social skills ended up causing her some embarrassment, but her riddle skills saved her in some cases. After the party, her and Lady Gaiza returned to the castle and watched the sunset. All in all, Reena described it as a perfect night. In 1066, Reena became queen, simply due to Hesperia wanting to spend some time on her songs and needed more time to take care of 5 and 3-year-old Fortuna and Dorina. She also claimed it was Reena's time now. Reena never did anything too impactful as queen. No major accomplishments were made, however, within the first few months of her reign, she expanded the Firefly Library. In 1067, Lady Gaiza departed back to her home dimension after her parents' return. Reena shed many tears that night. She hugged Lady Gaiza before she disappeared through the portal. Although she did leave, she would make many visits to Reena. Although her magic training came to a close already, Reena still heavily experimented with magic in the forest of certain death. In fact, it was in these experiments that she created her most powerful spell. The spell was Rubican Ravine Attack, in which the user would say and answer a riddle before the ground below the enemy would release from under them, separating into cubes and floating aside. During one of these visits to the forest, she came across Galaxia's secret library. Like the previous who came across her library, curiosity consumed her, and she read all the books. She decided to use Atmospheria's Flames of the Future spell, and she recorded the vision she saw in her diary. I witnessed 4 glowing butterfly figures, each with different cheek marks, suits sitting down with their hands in the dark green goop, and their cheek marks slowly fading away. I believe I found what this vision means. However, I don't know if it's true. Reena never returned to the library or used the spell again. During an MHC meeting in the Warnicorn of that year, Reena and Ronaldo got into an argument about riddles. That night, Reena crafted a spell to magically make Ronaldo like riddles to end the argument once and for all. The spell worked a little too well, resulting in Ronaldo only being able to speak in riddles. After a while, it worked and annoyed the MHC far too much, and they ended up kicking him out. They blamed Reena for this for a while, guilting her, but they eventually moved on. In Dwelf of that year, Reena's parents began to worry due to the fact that their daughter still hadn't had a husband, and an heir needed to be secured. In a normal situation, her parents would have trusted her to find one herself, but Reena never showed any interest in love or boys, so they decided to take care of it themselves. Hesperia arranged a marriage between her and Lord John Rochley, a second cousin to the Lusitors, with him and King Bodus Lusitor sharing the common ancestor of their great-great-grandmother, Queen Bushiastia Lusitor. After their dinner to meet each other, Reena recorded in her journal, "He's rather ignorant and somewhat rude, though he did say he admired my hair, which is nice." After a month of getting to know each other, their marriage was set into action. Reena was okay for the first few months, but after a while she became more apparent of John's rash behavior, and he would verbally abuse her sometimes. Reena didn't tell anyone of this, not even her parents, fearing she might make them feel guilty. In the new year of 868, Reena decided she had enough of his behavior and abuse and wanted him to leave her. She crafted a spell to break his heart, with the plan being he would leave her heartbroken after she casted the spell on him. That night, Reena secretly cast the spell on him during dinner. He remained the same for a few seconds before his face turned pale. He clenched his chest and started gasping for air before he fell on the ground. Reena went over to try and help him, and when noticing his rapid heartbeat, she knew what was happening. He passed that evening from a heart attack. Reena fell down into her room, overcome with tears and guilt. Things got even worse when she found out she was pregnant the day before John's funeral. While she was extremely happy and hopeful, she was sorrowful the baby would grow up without a father. Tensions between the Butterfly family and Lusitors grew extremely high after John's death, with them being extremely suspicious of Reena and the other Lusitors simply claiming she couldn't be trusted as John died in her care, and the tensions remained this way for years. Ultimately, John's death was covered up by the MHC to being a result of food poisoning from his dinner. In Razor Crane of that year, Reena gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She was the first ever recorded half-demon, half-human hybrid in the Butterfly family. She had her father's pink hair and purple eyes, as well as a third eye, a fang, and a tail and black bags under her eyes from her father's demon side. She was named Selena, derived from the Hymenian word Selene, meaning moon, due to the crescents on her cheeks. Selena proved to be an extremely shy and quiet child, and was heavily embarrassed by her demon traits. She learned how to hide them, though, and by the time she was 5, she could do it almost perfectly. Reena never pushed her to come out of her shell, claiming, "It was just her nature. That's the person she is. I don't want to disturb her." Reena was heavily protective of Selena, though it wasn't challenging due to her shy nature. The two were also extremely close, holding one of the best mother-daughter relationships ever. In 1074, Reena found the annual Firefly book spell, in which 6,000 books were sold to children across the kingdom, and it took place in the Firefly Library. It would later go on to be St. Reena's Day Book Fair. During Selena's 7th birthday in 1075, to everyone's surprise, the Lusitor family attended. They remained ignorant and spiteful to the Butterfly family members and only seemed to speak and give attention to Selena. After Selena blew out her candles, King Bodus Lusitor remarked Selena should return to the underworld with them, as, "If John died in your hands, who knows what will happen to Selena," causing Reena to blast him in the face. A commotion broke out but was stopped when Selena's cries were heard. Reena picked up Selena and ordered the Lusitors to leave. After this, tension between the two kingdoms became higher than ever, and speculation about Reena killing John became heightened, making the MHC and Reena fear. Reena tried to shield Selena from it, but would eventually find out the truth. After Selena's wand ceremony in 1082, Reena went to the scheduled meeting with the Lusitors in an attempt to ease tensions between the two families. Details of this meeting were unknown, however. King Bodis, his wife, and John's sister Aradia continued making remarks over how they should gain custody over Selena, claiming, "She doesn't have your evil butterfly blood. She belongs with us, where it's safe," causing Reena to walk outside the room in anger. All in all, it was clear the meeting made no progress. Rumors began to circulate later that year that Reena was having an affair with Castor Firefly due to her nights spent at the Firefly Library and Castor's nights spent at the Butterfly Castle, though nothing ever came of these rumors. During Selena's 15th birthday ball, the Lusitors once more attended and tried convincing Selena to move in with the Lusitors. An argument started between Reena and Aradia, after Aradia remarked, "If you don't let her come with us, come with her real family, then surely she'll come herself once she learns about the truth of her father's death," which made Reena slap Aradia. Aradia bursted into flames and attempted to slash Reena with her claws, but was stopped after being blasted by Selena. Reena began to notice that Selena was receiving visits from the Lusitors, mainly Aradia, Bodis, and his wife. Things got even stranger when Selena began attending royal Lusitor balls and events. While she knew they were her family as well, and she had a right to interact with them, Selena never had any desire to meet them before. Reena confronted them on the visits they gave Selena, and they threatened Reena, saying that if she didn't let the visits continue, they would reveal the truth about John's death. Reena, left with no choice, let them continue visiting and taking Selena to royal Lusitor events. In 1070, Reena was confronted by Selena, who was extremely sad and angry with lust in her eyes. Before she could say anything, Selena screamed, "Why didn't you tell me?" Followed by, "I know what you did to Dad." Reena explained that the guilt she felt concealed her from telling Selena, and that no child should ever bear that pain. Reena fell onto the ground crying, but Selena hugged her, and the two made up and had a vent session together in which Reena confessed all of her father and the Lusitors had done to her, which in turn caused Selena to cut all ties to the Lusitors and ignore them. As for how Selena found out, that will be covered in her chapter. In 1089, Reena witnessed her 21-year-old daughter marry her beloved fiancé Elm. During the ceremony, Reena shed a tear for how far her daughter had come. Thankfully, unlike many royal events before relating to Selena, the Lusitors were banned from coming by Selena herself. 2 weeks later, the night after Selena's coronation, Reena dozed off to sleep peacefully, but soon after awoke to the light of a flame inside her room. That quickly went out. She sensed someone in her room and immediately became prepared, but suddenly she was set to fire, burning her entire body. She fell on the ground and was held down and stabbed in the heart before it was clawed out of her. The last thing Reena ever would see was Aradia's face looming over her. The contents of what happened after her death will be told in the next chapter, but ultimately Reena was murdered at the age of 44. She was buried next to her grandmother Solaria. Reena and 7-year-old Selena at the royal ball. And for anyone that was confused about the skip, I don't remember what the time period is called, but we're no longer in the Dark Ages. We skipped Hecatea through Hesperia. So that would have been the Dark Ages and then the Renaissance or whatever it's called. And this does exist within Jig 0109's universe, but it is independent and its own thing. And we do not associate with Jigs. Okay, now for Selena the Shy. What lies behind the golden fan, the hand to sweetly hold, a trove of cosmic secrets that never will be told. Selena Butterfly, the Shy, born 1068, died 1130, reigned 1089 to 1110. Married to Elm Forest. Children Diana Butterfly, Astro Butterfly, Lumia Butterfly, Alva Butterfly, Black Hole Butterfly, and Starwind Butterfly. Selena Butterfly was born to Queen Reena Butterfly in an autumn night in 1068. She had her late father John's pink hair and purple eyes, as well as his demon traits, such as a third eye, horns, and a tail, a fang, and black bags under her eyes. She was named Selena for her crescent cheek marks. This would also mark the birth of the first ever hybrid heir in Muni history. As a kid, Selena was extremely, and I mean extremely, shy. She never spoke to anyone but her mother and grandparents. She didn't even speak to some of her aunts and uncles. She would always hide behind her mother during royal events and used her hair to cover her face. Aside from her immense shyness, Selena contained an extreme curiosity and was very sneaky. On top of this, Selena was extremely insecure over her demon traits. She would learn how to hide them and perfect the skill by the time she was 5, hiding her tail under her dress, keeping her horns from growing, hiding her third eye under a lock of hair, and shrinking her fangs. Despite her shy and introverted behavior, as well as her demon traits, Selena was praised as being an exquisitely beautiful princess, with many saying such beauty hadn't been seen since Queen Venus. Many people were unaware of her demon traits due to her concealing them as well. Many thought she was simply born that way and said the butterfly genetics are some of the most powerful, which they were both wrong and right. Selena would constantly be overrun by boys approaching and telling her she was pretty and that they liked her, which always ended in her feeling extremely embarrassed and her face turning as red as a tomato. Deep down, though, she would feel somewhat flattered. Selena, showing her demon traits. Selena was also extremely close to her mother, Reena. Since she had never had a father, she relied on Reena for everything. She also talked to her mother the most out of anyone. Sometimes Selena would even sleep in her mother's bed, which brought Reena comfort as well. Despite the absence of a father in her life, she did have a happy childhood, always playing games and visiting the flower garden and her mother. Hesperia also sang her lullabies and songs, even creating one just for her named the Pink-Haired Princess. Speaking of Hesperia, Selena seemed to pick up on her secret talent of singing from her. Although her voice was rarely heard, it was described as extremely beautiful and delicate. Selena would only sing in her room and alone in the flower gardens, and if you were to catch her, she would be overcome with immense embarrassment, sometimes so extreme she would cry about it. During her 7th birthday in 1075, her Lucitor aunts and uncles attended. She had known of them, but had never had any prior interaction with them. They ignored everyone at the party except Selena, and spoiled her with extravagant presents. With her aunt Aradia gifting her a 20-foot-tall ruby statue of a fire dwarf. After Selena blew out her candles, she noticed a fight break out between her uncle Bodis and mother Reena, which caused her to start crying and in turn ending the argument. Selena was always expected to grow out of her shyness, with many, including her family, believing it was a phase. However, they would be proven wrong, as by the time Selena was 12, she remained the same, though she did begin to speak more. When she did speak to others, however, it was very quiet, almost as if she was whispering, as well as limited. This was also the age Selena began her secret keeping and began acting extremely sensitive and dramatic due to her going through adolescence. She would cry much more than ever and even yell at her mom. She began apologizing for little things, mainly a symptom of her shyness though. She also kept a secret diary locked in a chest in her room. During an embarrassing moment where she was caught singing by her mother Reena, Selena accidentally burst into flames. Her demon traits were also revealed in this process, in which it was quickly fixed before apologizing. This confirmed Selena possessed her father's pyrokinesis, though she would conceal this as well as fearing she might hurt someone with it. In a day in 1081, Selena was roaming the castle library when she found a book from the Lucitor Kingdom on witch magic, potion crafting, and tarot cards. She was intrigued and studied the book all night. This is where her interest in the subject sparked. She secretly purchased a cauldron from a witch store in the underworld and gathered the rest of her equipment such as bottles, herbs, and crystals and such by herself. She used one of her secret rooms in the castle she found and converted it into her own potion crafting room. As for her tarot cards, she crafted and painted her own, eventually duplicating them with her wand. On her 14th birthday in 1082, Selena inherited the wand. It transformed into a different form that wasn't seen as it was hidden by a purple fan decorating with yellow crescents. Selena hid the wand from everyone but her own view, even going as far as to put a curse on anyone else who saw it, cursing them with painful shyness. The reason for this is unknown, but Selena was caught saying once, "The wand speaks to those who look at it." Nobody has been able to figure out what she meant. Selena's magic was heavily influenced by the art of witchcraft, which are spells mainly being curses, charms, or enchantments, with her most famous ones being Spell to Mend a Broken Friendship, the Apple of Love's Eye. Though her magic wasn't exclusive to the wand, she also excelled in the art of potion crafting, which she would use to her advantage. Selena and I also had a good relationship. She enjoyed talking to me when she got lonely, and even sought advice from me on matters that weren't even magic related. I must admit she was a favorite, no offense. During the tournament that year, Selena and her mother were roaming the fair when they got separated. Selena was overcome with a wave of anxiety when she was approached by a boy with swamp green hair, and she recognized him as Elm Forest from the Minister meetings. He offered to help her find her mother, and she accepted. The walk was awkward. Elm tried breaking the silence by saying something, but he stuttered. When Selena was reconnected with her mother, she waved goodbye to Elm. She thought about the moment for a few days, wondering what he had wanted to say, and that month's Minister meeting, Elm and Selena continued making eye contact, which embarrassed Selena. After the meeting concluded, Elm approached Selena once more, asking if she wanted to hang out. She stuttered for a straight 10 seconds before saying yes. A few days later, she went with Forrest to the Forest Watchtower to meet Elm. Unclear on where they would meet, the two awkwardly spent time together attempting to have fun, but it only resulted in uncomfortable moments. But after Elm got Selena to laugh and uncover her face, things got more enjoyable. That day, Selena made her first ever friend, and the more they spent time together, the more their relationship grew, and the more Selena spoke to him and let her guard down. One night while Selena fell to sleep, a few hours later she thought she had awoke, but she quickly realized she was in a dream. Selena looked around at the environment she was in. It was Butterfly Castle. She looked around more and saw a woman with blue hair blasting a lizard-looking monster. Before she could move any closer to inspect it, she awoke. She would have more of these strange dreams, but she couldn't make out what they meant. They began happening less frequently, however, with them almost completely stopping after a dream of a woman in a cloak performing a ritual on a young girl. Nothing more on these dreams would come until later in her queen years. That winter, Reena announced they would be visiting a royal gathering in the Spiderbite Kingdom for Princess Retula's 14th birthday. Selena also decided to invite Elm for some extra company. When they arrived, Selena received a lot of flirting from other princes there, whom were attempting to earn her heart and become future king. Prince Omar Baker flattered her with a giant cake, while Prince Tristan Spiderbite tried sneaking her a kiss, among other attempts. After the party, while Selena was walking down the halls alone to get to the exit, Her arm was grabbed by Omar. He leaned in and attempted to kiss her, to which she pushed him away. He tried grabbing her again, which scared her so much that her horns began to appear. Omar backed away in disgust and spat in her face while she began hysterically crying. He was about to fire a string of insults at Selena before he was punched to the ground by Elm, causing him to nosebleed. Selena quickly hid her horns from Elm before the two ran out of the exit of the castle and into the front path, where Selena cried in Elm's arms for 30 minutes straight. The incident made Elm and Selena's friendship stronger, with Selena talking to him more than ever. On her 15th birthday ceremony, her Lucidor family members attended. They once more spoiled her with presents and whispered bad things about her mother into Selena's ear, which made her uncomfortable, and she awkwardly ignored them. While talking with Elm in the corner of the room, she noticed a commotion break out with her mother, Reena, and Aunt Aradia. Seeing her mother about to get clawed caused Selena to dip down and blast Aradia away from her mother, making it her first time using an offensive spell on someone. After this, the Lucidors left the party and Selena vented to Elm about it in her room. Only 2 months later did Selena's grandmother Hesperia die. Selena was distraught and cried a lot the day she died. A week after her death, Selena received a visit from her uncle Bodis, claiming he heard about her loss and could teach her a little black magic so that she could talk to her grandmother. After he gave Selena some information and tricks, he left. Selena crafted a necromantic spell. There is no record of the spell, however it's a required ritual. A symbol with a skull would be drawn on the ground in ink, and ashes would be sprinkled around it. Leaves of the dead from the underworld would be placed around the symbol, and a phrase would be said, causing the person's ghost to appear. Selena used this spell on multiple accounts, to talk to her grandmother and even great-grandmother, but she stopped using the spell after Hesperia told her to, saying it was disturbing nature's order. And with one last hug, Selena said goodbye to her grandmother one last time. After using the spell, Selena noticed dark purple veins emerging from her wrist. She found this as a side effect of the spell since it was necromantic. She simply covered it with gloves she often wore and moved on. This would become Selena's first major secret. Her uncle Bodis began frequently visiting her, along with his wife Excella and her aunt Aradia. They would bribe her and tell her awful things about her mother, which made Selena heavily uncomfortable. Although they did have their good qualities, Aradia was outgoing, Bodis was charming, and Excella was sweet at times. Among this, they also taught her how to control her pyrokinesis. Because of their encounters, Selena began interacting with her Lucidor side of the family much more. During a ball she attended, she overheard Aradia and Excella started discussing whether or not to tell her the truth about her father. Selena finally decided to go out and find this apparent truth, and snuck to the royal archives with a large cloak so nobody could see her. While reading the records on her mother's life, after reading boredly for about 30 minutes straight, her eyes widened when she read the words, "This was the night Her Royal Majesty Queen Reena Butterfly accidentally killed King John Rochely Lucidor." After finishing reading the scroll, she headed back to Butterfly Castle to confront her mother. Selena was absolutely infuriated for the first time in her life, and she yelled at her mother. After the two vented to each other, Reena revealed all about her father's death and her involvement, as well as all the spite the Lucidors threw at her because of this. This made Selena extremely mad with the Lucidors, and she decided she had enough of them. She cut all ties with them and even went as far as putting a charm on her room to make it impossible for them to enter. Elm also helped her with bearing this new information she had to process, making her feel a lot better. During a morning in 1084, Selena went to Forest Watchtower to spend more time with Elm. When she arrived outside, she heard yelling and crashing from inside. She peeked inside the window to see Lord Grove Forest beating and yelling at Elm. Selena backed away crying in fear for Elm and returned back to Butterfly Castle. That night, Selena created a curse spell, once more involving dark magic. She used the charred remains of a Warnicorn skull, dirt from the Plague Kingdoms, and an action of and in an action to curse Elm's father. She also put a protection spell on Elm, making it so anyone who attempted to hurt him would be set to flames. A few days later, when she visited Elm, she found that the spell had worked as Lord Grove lay extremely sick, bound to his bed. Elm expressed his unbearing fear that his father might die as he held back tears. After this, Selena went back to the butterfly castle to undo the curse. However, while she was in the process, Elm walked in on her. He simply gave Selena a cold stare before running away and ignoring her for the next few days. Selena cried for many nights about the loss of her friendship, and even thought of using her spell to mend a broken friendship, but she knew her spell was what got her into the mess in the first place. After a week or two, Selena sent a note to Elm telling him to meet her outside the fourth watchtower the next night to talk, and he replied with a note simply saying, "Okay." The next night, they met outside fourth watchtower as they'd planned. At first, an awkward tension filled the air around them as they remained quite quiet and staring at the ground, but Elm was the first to speak up, sharing his feelings on how he didn't like Selena using magic on his father, saying it was dangerous and uncalled for. He said that even though his father was abusive, he didn't deserve to die. Selena replied with saying how he was her only friend ever, and that she'd do absolutely anything for him. She broke down crying before muttering out the words, "And because I love you, Elm." Elm replied ecstatically, saying he loved her too, that he always loved her. The day they first met, those were the words he tried saying. He secretly loved her the whole time, and now she'd revealed she loved him back. He was overwhelmed with happiness. He leaned in to kiss her, but she backed away from him and turned her back, saying, "I can't do this, Elm. I can't do this to you," while crying. He questioned her. She slowly revealed her demon traits, and she said, "How can you love me when I look like this?" while sobbing. Elm then leaned in and kissed her, saying, "I don't care about that, Selena. I just care about you." The rest of Selena's teenage years were mainly spent on her mother and Elm. However, her princess years ended when Elm proposed to her in 1086. Only a month later, their wedding was held. Throughout the entire ceremony, Selena had her face revealed, which was extremely rare, seeing as how she always hid it with her fan. She described the day as the happiest in her life in her diary. The following week, Selena's coronation was held. Though, unlike her wedding, she went back to hiding her face behind her fan. Other than that, the ceremony was nothing out of the ordinary. The only thing that was in that fact that Selena's mother, Reena, was murdered that night. Selena's crown. While viewing the scene, Selena immediately knew whom was the culprit after seeing the burn marks, and everything hit her at once. Selena spent the next week doing nothing more than crying and mourning, with King Elm reporting he would wake up in the middle of the night to see Selena curled up and crying. Elm was a huge comforter for Selena throughout this situation. Selena knew she had to pull herself together to avenge her mother and confront the Lucidor family. Before she left to the underworld, she casted a protection spell on herself and drank a potion to enhance her power. That night, she snuck into the Lucidor castle and confronted Bodis, Aradia, and Excella, whom her all in Bodis's room. Aradia remarked, "About time you'd come." Selena said nothing and remained with a face of cold anger before blasting Bodis and Excella straight through the heart simultaneously. Aradia was able to flee out of the room and through the secret castle dungeons. Selena followed her secretly. Just when Aradia thought she was safe, Selena pinned her to the wall and clawed out her heart as her horns and eyes turned demonic in rage. Selena covered up in the entire situation of her mother's, Bodis excelled, and Aradia's deaths, saying her mother's was a heart attack and the Lucidors were a suicide in an attempt to sacrifice themselves for demonic session. Not even the MHC knew, except for me, of course. The throne of the underworld was taken by Harmon, the oblivious and unintelligent younger brother of Bodis. In the year of 1087, Selena's miraculous dreams continued. She could barely make out what they meant, but they came up with a way to figure out what they meant after her curiosity grew into too intense for her to bear not knowing what they meant. Every time she had a dream, she would record them in a book, then cast a spell on a stack of tarot cards. The next 5 cards she placed would magically describe the event. In example, one night she received a dream about a woman with spades romantically embracing a large red monster. When she used the tarot card spell, 5 cards she placed from the assorted stack were the monster lover, the size shifter, the little flower, the hybrid, the invasion, and the crystallizer. One night, while she received yet another dream, this time she opened her eyes to see she was in a completely dark void. She then approached by a glowing figure made of light, who had one single eye. He said his name was Cronius, and he had tried contacting the butterfly family for generations via telekinesis, and was only able to reach Selena, and he sent her dreams as a message. The two would continue to meet in Selena's dreams. Cronius continued telling her future events relating to the future butterfly queens, as well as very important cosmic events of the future relating to the magic celestial matters, the fate of Muni and the butterfly queens, and even the ending of the butterfly family. She added all of this information to her book and the cryptic messages. When thinking of a place to hide it, she remembered a secret library her mother once told her about when she was little. Selena found it by pure chance and hid the book in the chest she found there, coming to the library to write her recordings. Eventually, Selena found that she couldn't handle bearing the knowledge of all these things, so she decided to tell him she wanted their meetings to stop, which enraged Cronius. Selena quickly woke up and later that day casted a protection charm on herself to prevent Cronius from entering her mind or telepathically transporting her to this void. This would conclude her visits with him, and she placed her book back in the chest for the last time. Only few of her cryptic messages would be known, with some of them being the great dark night attempting to engulf the sky will come to an end when the dawn sun rises up from the night. When the soaring comet falls, the moon will rise up and decay the evil lizard with an ecliptic blast. In 1090, Selena gave birth to her first child, whom she named Diana. She had teal green hair, green eyes, and pine trees on her cheek as cheek marks. The next year, in 1091, she had her second child, Alva. She possessed brown hair and green eyes with leaves on her cheeks. In 1093, she had her third child, Astro, a boy with green hair and purple eyes. Selena always contained a deep interest in astrology, and while reading records from Queen Asteria, she came up with an idea to create a zodiac/star sign representing each personality of someone according to the constellation month in the Median calendar. There were 2 versions of the star signs: Aroli signs, which didn't accord to the calendar, or constellations, and mutant animals were used with the signs, and then there was the Asterian zodiac signs, which corresponded to each constellation/month. The signs would match a specific date and would tell the personality, traits, and relationship of the people born under the sign, though it is not always accurate. Selena also created moon signs according to the different moon phases and the day the queens of Muni. A combination of all signs would make for a more accurate description of a person. Selena also began giving readings of her ministers at their request, and this proved to show how accurate her readings were. She would look into her wand and it would communicate a cryptic phrase only she could hear, and when she repeated it, an example, when giving a reading to Lady Atlanta Watterson, she said, 3 rivers will emerge from the sea. Then later that year she had triplets. Another example is when she gave a reading to Lord Limerick Fields. She said, the strand of wheat will fall at the hands of the amphibian, and later that week his son was killed by a frogman. Later, Selena would continue to do these readings, however only to people she knew and was close to. In 1097, the Butterfly Castle was raided by a small group of monster rebels attempting to murder the royal family. They were detained and were punished, and thankfully nobody was hurt. However, the incident made Selena fear for the safety of Diana and her 2 other children, Alvina and Astro. She came to the decision to send them to safety in the Sylvan Kingdom, far from the ongoing war. In 1096, 7, when Diana and her siblings returned, Selena noticed her daughter's new talent with the bow and arrow. In 1100, Selena gave birth to her fourth child, a boy whom she named Black Hole, just like Alva had brown hair and green eyes. The next year, in 1101, Selena had Lumia, a girl with pink hair and green eyes and orange tear-shaped cheek marks. In 1104, Selena passed the wand to Diana. Soon she began to wonder about Diana's mysterious visits to the forest. At first, she simply assumed they were normal hunting trips, but her mother's intuition told her it was something more. She decided to leave it alone, saying, "I'll keep my secrets, I'll let her keep hers." Selena passed the wand to Diana in 1104 and used a regular fan to replace her wand's fan. Later, in 1105, Selena had her final child, a girl named Starwin who had brown hair and green eyes with inverted stars on her cheeks. In 1110, Selena passed the crown to Diana after her marriage to her cousin Tilford. 2 years later, she welcomed the birth of her granddaughter Comet in 1112, soon after Estrella in 1114, Quasar in 1115, and Etheria in 1116. In 1020, Elm contracted an unknown disease. Selena, paranoid about his death, did a secret tarot reading on him. The cards she got were the widow, the fallen tree, and the death. Selena knew what the cards meant and wept the entire night, and even more the next morning when he passed. Selena witnessed her granddaughter Comet marry and become pregnant in 1130. However, sadly that same year, Selena passed at the age of 62 due to natural causes. Selena and Elm on their wedding day. And that was the biography of Selena the Shy. And then I did want to do Comet the Chef, but my voice hurts too much. We're going to have to end it here today. Transition. Oops, didn't mean to show that. Sorry guys, you had to see that for a minute. Bloop. Giant. So, thank you guys for joining today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I am very tired now. I think I might. I'm gonna take a little nap, I think. Sorry guys, I'm really out of it now. I guess I will finish Comet's biography either in another live stream or I'll make a video on it in his upcoming next couple weeks. So thank you all for joining. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye, 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 bye.